can burn. I'm keeping my lamp full, waiting on the bridegroom. Cause when the kingdom comes, say I won't.
Warning, the following video contains explicit content and depicts graphic violence, which may be offensive to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome back to Lamp Oil Sock, a channel where we look at different issues from an Israelite point of view. And today, we're going to do something a little different. What do you got for us today?
Well, that was an intro.
I can do a different one.
Today we're going to talk about rape. So this is Let's Talk About.
Wow. Okay. Sure. Let's talk about it. Okay.
Okay, so I guess recently, I've been seeing some people kind of skim around the topic of rape, or mention rape in one case or another case. And, you know, it's just been on my mind. And, you know, I go back to the Me Too movement.
Okay.
You know, when that was a big thing and people were talking about how they were sexually harassed or how someone raped them, and it made all of this big media attention.
Right.
And I hated that movement. I hated the movement because they trounce out a lot of people who seem less than sincere, trying to gain a few moments of fame or trying to grab some money.
Right.
And they go after some people and ignore other people, all in some movement to bring attention to rape or sexual assault survivors, when what they, in my opinion, did was make it seem as if it wasn't that big of a deal, or that so many people lie about it that you can't take it seriously, or that it just seemed like they lessened the horror that a lot of people have been through and live with, because you have that Bill Cosby case. I didn't believe those women. I just didn't. I didn't believe those women. Now, I'm not saying that he didn't do it or that he did do it. As a matter of fact, by the end of it, I didn't really care because the women were so unbelievable.
Okay. No.
In my opinion.
Okay, now hold on a second. Before we go on, you've been assaulted yourself.
Right.
And what you're saying, if you'll, please correct me if I'm getting this wrong. What you're saying is the Me Too movement, even though the selling point was to say, bring attention to, or at least the way they were trying to say about it, to bring attention to sexual assault, you didn't get that from it.
No, I feel like that it made, it turned people away from people who were really having issues, or people who've really experienced this type of issue, because a lot of those women weren't believable. They seemed as if they were trying to get their 2 minutes of fame. And I can tell you, as someone who's experienced it, fame or money is not one of the things that come to my mind when I think of the issue in the trials that I experienced. So I think that it set those people who were suffering or who were trying to cope with their experiences, I feel like it set them back, because you have people who, hopefully, you have people who haven't experienced it, and they're looking at a bunch of actors trying to imitate something, you know.
I understand what you're saying.
So when you hear about it or you talk about it, and a lot of times people make jokes about it, and or they make light of the situation because it's more about the person who committed the crime, right? Um, Instead of about the person that the crime was committed to, you know. Oh, you can have what's his name? Was it R. Kelly, the famous guy who was accused of all of this stuff? And he's, you know, in the news and he's going to trial, and what did he do, and blah blah blah, and did these girls want it? Did they deserve it? You know, but nobody ever looks at the person who went through it or how that changes a person. You know, I look at, you have all of these negative stereotypes going around about women, and you hear some men calling every woman a Jezebel that is not highly submissive, you know?
Right.
And so it makes it makes the victim or the person who's had this trauma happen to them feel as if there's something wrong with them, as if they've done something bad, as if they should be ashamed because something happened to them. But the people who do these types of things are oftentimes propped up or looked at in a good light. So, you know, you have these men who go around from woman to woman to woman, you know, and they're looked at as some great type of guy because they can have so many women. And this type of behavior is accepted and encouraged in society. But you have women who, if they were to do anything that seemed kind of promiscuous or involved sexually in some manner, they're looked at as a whore or slut. And now you have this movement where these women are going out and they're using their bodies and saying, I can do this and I can be this whore and I can be that slut. And as an Israelite, of course, the first thing you want to do is look down on these women and vilify them. But we don't look at how this all came about or how it started or why it's like that. So you have the man, he's taught that going out and getting all these women is a good thing. He's looked up upon, and so he gets this wrong idea of what a man is. You know, I've had sex, so now I'm a man, as if that is what makes you a man. And, you know, maybe that, I'm not sure if that's something that people say today, but I know when I was younger, that was kind of the thought that once a guy had sex, he was now a man, you know, and for a woman, it was once she came on her period, she is now a woman. But we have these ideas and notions that are out there society-wise, and what I think that we ignore the underlying problems. I'm going to use myself for an example. When I was younger, and because it's been so long ago, I can't really remember ages. You know, I can say before I was 10, but exactly what age, I don't know. But I know that I had my grandpa molest me. I had my second cousin molest me. I had an uncle fondle me. And someone else that I can't say it on the air. and a female cousin that was about 5 or 6 years older than me messed with me as well. And as a kid, I can tell you that I forgot as I grew older. It just kind of left my mind when my cousin molested me. I don't know how, but I didn't remember it again until I was in my 20s, and he was in jail. And he was my favorite cousin. I hung out with him all the time. We did stuff all the time, but he had gone to jail, and he was dying. And I started remembering what he had done to me when I was, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, something like that. And he would write me and call me, and I wouldn't take his phone calls, and I wouldn't write him back because I was starting to remember what he had done to me, and I didn't know how to deal with it because he was my favorite cousin, and how could he be my favorite cousin if he had done this stuff to me? And eventually, one of the people he was in jail with contacted me because he was dying and he couldn't. So I go, they'd taken him out of the prison to a hospital, and I go see him, and I tell him I love him and I forgive him, but it was very difficult because on one hand, I did love him, but then on the other hand, it's like, but he did this to me, you know? But with him, I remember I lived with my grandparents, and my grandparents' house was on this huge lot, and right beside it, my granddad's sister lived, and her husband, and he was their son. So I wasn't allowed to go anywhere or do anything, you know, because I'm a girl. But so I didn't have anybody to play with. I was the only one. I was the only child there. So I got to play with him if he would play with me. But he was like 10 years older than me. So, you know, he wouldn't really play with me that much. So mainly I just bugged him because, you know, he was the only person around. Or when his friends came around, I'd try to hang out with them. So one day he comes to me because he got this bell for his bike. And I thought it was really neat. And I wanted a bell for my bike. And I asked him if he'd let me have it. And he told me he would if I did something for him. So I was like, okay, what do you want? So he got me to go to the back of the yard. There was a shed that was in between the fence and the yard. And he got me to go behind that, and he told me to take off my pants and lay down. So that's what I did because I wanted this belt. And so he got on top of me, and you know, I can remember now there was some grunting or something, but I didn't know what was happening. And then there was this liquid, and it grossed me out because I thought he had slobbered on me. So I yelled, "Yuck, you slobbered on me." And I told him to get off me. And he got off me, and he helped me put my clothes back on, and he helped me, you know, clean the stuff out of my hair and stuff. And then we walked back to the house, and he took the bell off of his bike and gave it to me and put it on my bike. And so I was very happy that I got a bell. And then I was able to, you know, when my brother come over, and he would play with my cousin, and I got to tell my brother that my cousin liked me more than him because he gave me his bell. And I can remember riding my bike, ringing my bell because I felt very special. And, you know, it was just weird, you know, with my grandpa. he, stuck his tongue down my throat, and he felt on me. And I remember telling my parents that I didn't like being around him because he would stick his tongue in my throat. And so they told me I didn't have to go around him anymore unless I wanted to. And so I was good with that after that, because he would try to touch me, and I just felt uncomfortable, but I didn't really understand. So as long as I didn't have to be around him by myself, then that was fine. Then I remember we had a cousin who had been put into foster care. And so my aunt that I stayed with a lot had taken her in for a while because her mother was on drugs or something. This is like a second cousin, And so when we were at my aunt's house, and my aunt slept in one room and she put me and her in another room. And she's older than me, about 5 or 6 years older than me. And she was like, "You want to see something?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Okay, you can't tell anybody." I'm like, "I won't tell anybody." What? So we had taken baths, right? So we had on gowns, but we didn't have on any underclothes. So she raised up my gown and she got on top of me, and she started moving back and forward on top of me. And well, you feel stuff, and it felt weird, but it kind of felt good. I don't know. It was interesting, and I knew that I'd get in trouble if I tell anybody. So I didn't tell anybody. And a little while later, she goes back with her mom, and I don't see her for a long time, and I kind of forget about that because it happened, and then it was gone. And so as you're growing up, I had an uncle who was a little too touchy-feely. Somehow he would always end up with his hand on my private parts, but he would be trying to help me up, or pick me up and move me from one place to another. So you learn how to walk around these people or not get too close to these people. But it's just part of life. And as a kid, not really understanding what that's doing to you, it changed the way you think or the way you act, but in small, subtle ways. And it just becomes a way of life. But then as you get older, with me, as I got older, when I was having these things happen to me when I was younger, I didn't know what it was, but as I got older, I started realizing what it was. And I guess in a way, ignorance is bliss, because as I got older and I started realizing what had happened to me, or understanding what had happened to me, I felt ashamed and like I was a bad person. Because how could you be so stupid not to know? Or it must be because it's what you really wanted. And only bad people want that stuff. So, your thoughts of yourself change, and I hated myself when I was younger. Now, once I got into middle school, I had my grandmother's brother try to have sex with me. And I knew that if I told somebody, I would get in trouble. At least that's how I felt. So I didn't tell anybody, but I had some other cousins with me. And we all decided that we weren't going to tell anybody what he asked us to do with him. And then one of my cousins broke our pact, and she went and told. And then my grandparents, because it was my grandmother's brother, told me it was my fault, that I was a whore, and that he wouldn't have done it if I hadn't done something to make him do it. So, you know, when you're told these things, especially when those people who are caring for you, they are your world, then it's hard for you to believe something different. So you start to accept what you're told. Now, older and time and perspective, you can understand or think back that, you know, these people didn't know how to react. They didn't know how to deal with the situation. And, you know, even with my grandmother's brother, I never had to see him again, you know. He lived for a long time. And we never went to visit him anymore. We never went around. And when we would have family get-togethers, he wouldn't show up. But so I understand that it's a difficult thing to talk about. But if we want to be real, you know, I would say most women have experienced what I'm talking about. Not, or at least, you know, 1 out of every 3 women have experienced similar things. But that's because there's this hush up and hide and blame the victim. There is no healing, no help or support for the victim. It's get used to it, move on, deal with it. And I think it definitely changed the way I saw life and the way I saw men. To, you know, not really seeing men as people. You know, girls were people, but men were something else. And I loved, you know, my granddad, which is not to be confused with my grandpa. You know, Grandpa Eagle. Loved my granddad. And, you know, my dad, well, he was just mean, and we didn't get along. He didn't like me, I didn't like him. So, you know, the boys and girls are treated different. You know, I was told I couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't do anything because I was a girl, whereas my brother, they were able to go everywhere and do everything because they were boys, and yet I was hurt a hell of a lot more not being able to go anywhere than I was when I left. But if you move forward in time, as I said, the things that happened to me as I was a kid, you kind of block out, ignore and move on. Going through school, I had this one guy. He was at we had gone to this concert, and these guys tried to force me to go with them. They wouldn't leave me alone, you know. And so he steps in for me, and he gets in between me and the guys so that they leave me alone. But then that put all their, anger on him, and they beat him up. But it got them off me, and then I kind of went off in one direction to get away, and I'm not really sure what happened, because I left when I could get away. I ran. And so later on, I'm at home, and he was a friend of the family. I'd known him my whole life. So he comes over to my house because he knows my grandparents aren't home, because he's a friend of the family. His family knew, so he knew. So he comes over, and I open the door, and I see it's him, and I let him in, and he starts talking to me, and he's mad at me because I ran away and those boys beat him up because he was trying to protect my honor. And then I realized that he feels like I should have sex with him because he protected my honor and got his butt beat. So then he tries to force himself on me. And I was able to get out of that situation because I was like, I'll tell your mom, and you know that my family knows your family, and And he eventually stops, and he just stands up and he leaves. And later on, I'm a junior in high school, and I go to Fisk University because one of my girlfriends was going to college there. And we go, my grandma lets me go and stay with her, and me and her go to a party. And then we go from that party to an after party at a house. And we get to this house, and, well, she has a boyfriend. So she decides that she wants to go off with her boyfriend, and she leaves me at the after party. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I'm drinking, it was called Omega juice, which was grape juice and pure grain alcohol. And, I don't really realize how drunk I am. But until, I start to try to walk and go away, and then I'm just really drunk, and I don't know how I'm going to get home because I'm in the city. I know nobody except for my girlfriend who left with her boyfriend. I don't even know her telephone number. Not with me, at this point. So I start looking around, and I ask some people if they'll take me home. And I come across, it's a football player and he's an Omega. And he was like, yeah, I'll take you home. So he was like, follow me into this room, let me get my keys. I'm like, okay. So I walk into the room with him, and there's some people in there, and I kind of just, it's a bedroom, so I just kind of fall on the bed because, like I said, I'm totally drunk. And he tells the people to get out of the room, and he closes the door. And I'm like, I thought you were going to get your keys. He's like, yeah, I am. Then he jumps on the bed, and he pushes me back down on top of him, and he's starts trying to rip off my clothes. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Leave me alone. Because at this point, besides the fact that I'd been molested several times, I was still a virgin. I'd never actually had sex with someone I wanted. I had decided to have sex with. So I'm fighting him off, and I start screaming and yelling. And this guy comes to the door, and he opens it up. And I'm screaming, help me. He won't help me. And the guy says something. He doesn't really say something, but he makes some sort of call out. And the guy looks at me, and then he says, all right, man, I'm sorry. And he leaves and closes the door. So the guy continues, and I'm still screaming, and somebody else comes to the door. And I'm like, help me. And the guy that's on top of me is like, I got this, go away. And the guy says, all right, man, I'm sorry. He leaves and closes the door. So I'm trying to fight this guy because I realize nobody's going to help me. And he does something stupid. He has on a watch, and in order to show his power over me, he tells me to take his watch off. In the midst of him trying to rape me, he's like, take my watch off. So he puts his wrist over me, and I start to take off his watch, and I hit him as hard as I can in his groin, which makes him bend over, and I jump up and I run out the door. And I run outside, and there's this couple leaving, and I ask them for a ride, and they take me back to the school. So I was like, it was close, but I got out unscathed, no problems. This is the second time that I haven't had it happen to me. So I felt like I can beat anybody. And I was a tomboy, so I used to fight guys anyway. There's no situation I can get out of, right? Then I started dating this NFL player. He was so sexy. He had these green eyes. And we started dating, kinda. But we hadn't done anything, And then, he kind of disappears. And so I move on. I start dating someone else, and getting involved in another relationship. And one day, after about 3 months, he shows up at my door out of the blue. My boyfriend's going to come over, and I have on a lingerie outfit. So I go to the door thinking, it's my boyfriend, and I look out and I see it's not him. But this guy that I'd kind of gone out with, and so I try to just be quiet and tip away from the door to make him think I wasn't home, because I didn't want to deal with him, because my boyfriend was getting ready to show up, and I didn't want my boyfriend seeing me talking to some guy. So I tip back, and as I'm trying to tip away from the door, I knock into something, and it makes a noise. So then he starts screaming, I know you're there, I hear you. So I throw on some clothes over what I have on, and I open the door, and he's like, let me in. I was like, no, you can't come in. My boyfriend's getting ready to come over. You got to go. He's like, look, I got to use the bathroom. Just let me in for a moment to use the bathroom, and then I'll leave. I was like, okay, fine. So he comes in and closes the door, and he has a friend with him, and he tells his friend to go get him some chicken, which was 2 minutes down the road, come back and pick him up. So his friend leaves. I let him in. I take him to, show him where the bathroom is, whatever. And when he comes back, he was like, I ain't seen you in a while. You looking good. And I'm like, you missed your chance. Sorry. I'm dating someone else now and whatever. So then he gets upset and he throws me on the bed. And he starts trying to rip my clothes off of me. Now, mind you, I had a lingerie outfit on underneath the clothes I had on. So he starts ripping my clothes off of me, and then he sees what I have on, and he gets really, really upset then. And then I'm trying to fight him off of me, and he hits me. And then he threatens to really hurt me if I don't stop fighting. So I do. I stop fighting. So he has sex with me. And while he's on top of me, I'm mad and I'm crying and I'm begging him to just stop and leave me alone. And then for a moment, it felt good. And then I started hating myself because this isn't what I wanted. How can it feel good? But he finally gets done. He jumps up. He runs out the door. Now, as he's running out the door, I eventually get up and I go to the door and I look outside and he's jumping into a car and my boyfriend is looking at him. So he comes up to the house and now I'm all disheveled, right? Because I just had sex. And he starts accusing me of being a whore. And calling me all these names. In front of everybody. Because it was outside. He's just yelling outside. How much of a whore I am and how I give it to everybody and how he should have known he could never trust me because I'm nothing. And, you know, I thought I was in love. And that, you know, he loved me and so anyway, he eventually just tells the whole world, it seemed, that I was just a whore and that he caught me having sex with somebody when I knew he was coming over. So I must be a really huge whore just because he was a little late showing up. And, it gets back to my family, it gets back to everybody. Now, I think as far as who I was, that is what really changed me. Because it's like it's like you die. Nothing looks the same. Nothing feels the same. And when at first, it was hard for me to get out of bed. It was hard for me to speak to somebody because I knew they knew that I was just a whore. Because even though I told him that I was raped, he wouldn't believe me, or at least he said he didn't believe me. And nobody else. I mean, why would you believe a whore was raped? So it was hard for me to see people. It was hard for me to do stuff. And eventually, I went to work and I would go to work and I would see somebody and I'd just start crying, or somebody would say something, I'd just start crying. And my manager came up to me and she told me to get the fuck over it. Start living or kill yourself, basically. And even though it sounds harsh, it was helpful. Because that's what I did. I decided I can't live like this. So I have to live. And then I guess I created someone who could live. Someone who couldn't be hurt. Someone who couldn't be touched. So then I became the whore. Because I wasn't going to care about a guy because they obviously don't know what care even is or what love is. So that was never going to happen. I was never going to be hurt again. So I would, deal with the guy, get what I wanted, and move on. But it's not just the sexual aspects either. I also started selling drugs. I started doing all types of things that I'd never done before because I was dead. I was walking around, but there was there was no me anymore. It was just, I'm going to survive. I'm going to live, and anybody who doesn't want me to live is going, is someone that can be crushed. So I used to get a thrill out of hurting men or making them upset or cry over me. But at the same time, I never believed that a man could actually love, so I couldn't really hurt him, but I could hurt his pride. I could take his power away from him because he wanted me. And I got a lot of joy, or I guess joy is not the right word. It was satisfying. It was what I knew, or what I could imagine as happy. But also I started drinking a lot. Because, like I said, you die. There's really no life in you. And, I did a lot of bad things, but when you're dead, you spread that death to everybody around you. And the person that killed me was dead, and he was just spreading his death. And, you look at people and you see the things that they do. You look at these women and you see how they treat their children, or, you call them thoughts, or you think that they're bad parents because they're doing that. But how can you expect someone who's been killed to act in a way that's conducive to life? And, I was a Christian, I was a Baptist, but you don't talk about rape. That's something you ignore, you hide. It's a secret. The problem is that it's a secret in damn near every household on the planet. It's that thing you don't talk about. And there are so many people suffering. And you live your life and you think you're living and you're doing the best you can, but the best you can is still killing everything that you touch. It wasn't until I healed that I was able to change again. It wasn't till I came back to life when I was able to forgive myself, because the feelings and the thoughts you have, like when I was raped, and I thought it felt good. I mean, that's embarrassing, right? Because are you really being raped if you think it feels good? So I had to forgive myself, and I had to realize that it wasn't my fault. And then I had to, I guess the best thing you can do is let God heal you. Let God take the pain, put it all on Him. As I started trying to rebuild my life and get into the Most High, of course, then things went. Okay, so the question is not if you have to come back to life, I guess. It is, how do you do it? And I think it's a starting process. It's a process. It's not an overnight type fix. But I had a child, and because I had this child, I had life. My child was life for me. You know, I was dead, but she was perfect and special, and so I wanted to do better for her. Because up until I had her, I didn't really care what happened. You know, I assumed I would die at some point, be killed, and I was good with that because, you know, who cares? It was about me getting enjoyment of my time. But when I had her, she had to be protected. I didn't want her to have the life that I had, so I started changing to try to make things right for her. So in doing that, I started trying to go back to the Most High and studying that, but that wasn't enough because the Bible or the church that I was going to, or the way I'd been raised, was women were, you know, not that important. You know, so, you know, it wasn't enough. So I started going back to the Bible myself, and that, it took many years, let's be honest, and I made a lot of mistakes, but slowly over time, God started letting me see who He was, and as I learned more of who He was, it healed more of who I was. So it's like I came back to life slowly, and you know, eventually I meet you, and as we get into the Bible and stuff, it gets me to the point where I can do this video and talk about that subject that nobody wants to talk about. And not feel embarrassed or ashamed or have any negative feelings, because it happened. And because of it, and because of me not really knowing God, or me not really knowing what love was, I did a lot of horrible, what I would call horrible things today. But all of those experiences are for a reason, and all of those things have helped me become who I am. So I don't look back at those things and say, I wish that hadn't happened to me, because then who would I be? If it, you know, I think all of the experiences I went through, both the good and the bad, have helped mold me into the person I am today, and they have taught me lessons, and to the point where I'm making a video hoping to help somebody else who has experienced or is experiencing something, to help them come to the light and let go of the pain and the anguish and the hate that they have for themselves, so that they can see that regardless of all of that, the Most High loves you, and that He always has, and that He always will. And all you have to do is open yourself up to Him, and if you do that, He will take care of that pain. He will heal it, and He will bring you to a place that is so much better. And you know, in the Bible, if a man rapes a woman, that man is to be put to death. And there's a story about Dinah, and she's raped, and Abraham gets his sons together, and they go kill a whole town because this prince rapes his daughter. And today, our women and our children, and fuck women. I mean, it's not women, because there's so many men that are raped too. Our children are raped. Our young men, our young women are raped. They are destroyed. And barely anything is said about it. It's like we have devalued ourselves. The secrecy has taken away the value of that life that's being destroyed, to the point where we don't even realize that we have destroyed that life. And we then expect that life to do something that's good. But in this story, they didn't devalue the life of Dinah. They realized that what was done to her was akin to killing. And they avenged that. So they didn't hide it. They didn't say, put it in the corner, this is not something to be talked about. They did something about it. They showed her that they loved and they cared about her, and that she was special enough to go to war with the whole fucking kingdom. Because she had been raped. And we like to say, the Bible says she was humbled. And we like to use that word because humbled, she was put in line, that's another way of, it, when you look at the word humbled, it is, I humbled myself. This is something I did freely. You're supposed to humble yourself in front of, in front of the Most High, or for the Most High. But when someone humbles you, they are taking away your power. They are getting you in line. And a lot of men feel as if it is their job to humble their women. So when someone hurts us, well, you've just been humbled. Isn't that what's supposed to happen? We're supposed to have our power and our strength ripped from us so that we are the obedient thing you want us to be? What are we telling each other when this is the type of thoughts and ideas we have? But if you continue to look at the Dinah story, we don't get an idea of what she went through or how she dealt with it. But we know that the Most High didn't leave her, right? Because we eventually find out that she marries Job, who we know was a good, righteous man. And she bears him many sons and daughters. So she went through something that was traumatizing, but at the end, the Most High blessed her with a good family and a good life. And, I went through a lot of stuff. But at the end, I have a great husband and great children, and I have been blessed. So, there is life after it, or there can be life afterwards, but people have to be able to talk about this subject. People have to be able to learn that it's okay to be angry, to be upset. They have to learn that it's not their fault. They have to learn to be able to forgive themselves, because you can't forgive someone else if you haven't forgiven yourself, So everything has to start with you. And so I think that because this is such a subject that is taboo, that isn't spoken about, that there's a lot of a lot of, you don't, you you see a lot of evil stuff or bad stuff that people are doing, and you talk about that, and so it just continues to grow and spread. So you can't. It's like you go to the doctor because you have a hole in your chest and they fix the scratch on your arm, you know, and they expect everything to be better. So yes, a lot of our women may be out of pocket, and so may a lot of our men be out of pocket. But the problem with what you're seeing, the way they're acting, the way they're doing these things, that's the effects of the overall issue, the destruction of their spirit, of their souls, of who they were, that happened to them. But where do you get help for that? Where do you go? How do you do it?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I was listening to the entire story. I mean, I was moving through the story. I don't, using your own example, you know, starting to get your spirit reconnected with the Most High, to me, seems like the starting point.
Right. But you
And I mean, I'm not saying that like in your story, it was the birth of your daughter,
right,
that started the opening to make a change in your life.
right.
You know, and I'm not trying to give a platitude, you know, and say, oh, you know, just start reading the Bible and everything will be better. That's not it. This, for you, I know, was a long years and years and years process.
Yeah, but for me, eventually, the Most High led me kind of down a road that got me to being healed and changed my life around. I just wish that there was something better for people. It took me a damn near lifetime to go from what I was to who I am. And there's so many people hurting. I don't know how to show them the way, how to get them started on the healing process, except by talking about it. So that's what we're doing.
Okay. Wow, guys. Thank you all so very much for taking more than a few minutes to hear the whole story. Some of the story I hadn't heard myself. You hadn't told me everything, all of the details. Wow. So hopefully, listening to this, it can give you a window into the experiences of someone else and get you to take stock of the things going on in your life. And this is going to seem a little odd, but one of the things we talk about in the Bible, or as the Most High says, I know the end from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so often when you're going through a situation, when you're going through a thing, you cannot see the end result. You can't see you can't see the end. But like when we read a Bible story, like with the story of Job is going through all these things, and we know how it turns out. Mm-hmm. We know how it turns out, and this is, when listening to your story, I know where you are today. I know where you are today, but to recount what happened to you so long ago at the time. Hopefully it can, no matter how dark it is at this moment, to know that there is an end to the tunnel at some point.
You know, I also hope that people who haven't experienced this rape or molestation, one, never do, but two, before you judge somebody so harshly by what you see, you take a little time out and try to love that person first. Try to figure out why they're acting this way. Why are they doing this? You know, people, you know, I think as a little girl, when I was young, I didn't think that I was going to have the life that I lived, and I didn't want that life. You know, that's not something that I dreamed of having, and yet it is a life that I ended up having. So you see these women or men, and they are living or having these self-destructive lives, and it's easy to judge what you see now, but show them some love and try to help them. I'm not saying everybody can be helped, but some people just need to know that somebody cares, and maybe you can be that person to that someone.
Well, guys, once again, thank you all so very much for taking a few moments, and like I said, more than a few moments, to hear this particular story. Thank you all once again. Do you have anything else?
Kwame Yasharala.
Bye.
Falls on us all, the good and the bad. The same thing that'll make you laugh one day, well, it's gonna make you sad. And now I see I gotta walk by faith and never walk by sight. No, I don't understand your ways, but I know you're always right, and I surrender.